At the family dinner, my daughter-in-law leaned close and hissed, "I'm pregnant with your husband's baby, you tacky old woman." My breath caught for a moment, but I laughed softly, not shaken, not broken. I folded my napkin, laid it neatly on the table, and told her, "Don't worry, dear. That was only the first step in a plan she never saw coming." Before I share the story, I'd love to know, how are you doing today? Charleston carries a kind of warmth in late November, the kind that clings to your skin even when the breeze is cool. That evening, my house smelled of roasted ham glazed with brown sugar, collard greens simmered with smoked turkey, and cornbread fresh from the cast-iron skillet. The oak dining table I had polished earlier gleamed under the chandelier. I wanted the night to feel whole, like a family should, even if I already knew cracks ran beneath the surface. I sat at the head of the table, the place where my mother once sat in her house before she passed it down to me. Quentin, my son, sat across, laughing as he poured sweet tea into tall glasses. His wife, Isolde, wore a smile that never reached her eyes, the kind of smile that slices instead of softens. Osric, my husband, avoided looking at me, though he passed the basket of biscuits as though the gesture would smooth over years of distance. I held my fork steady, trying to savor the smell of gravy thickening in its bowl and the butter melting on the cornbread. Still, under it all, I felt something in the air, something colder than the November wind outside, while Quentin leaned toward Osric, telling some story about work. Isolde turned toward me. Her perfume was sharp, out of place among the scents of my kitchen. She leaned close, her lips brushing the shell of my ear, and whispered words that broke the night in half. "I'm pregnant with your husband's baby, you tacky old woman." For a second, I forgot how to breathe. My fork hovered above the ham, suspended as though the air had turned solid. My ears rang, not with laughter or clinking glasses, but with those words circling like hawks over my head. I stared straight ahead, eyes on the cranberry sauce glistening under the light. Quentin chuckled at something Osric had said, oblivious, his joy loud enough to cover my silence. I wanted to scream, to slam my fists on the table, to throw the dishes against the wall until glass rained down like judgment. Instead, I sat still, hands trembling under the tablecloth where no one could see. The smell of gravy thickened, filling my nostrils as though mocking me for thinking food could bind us together. The silverware clinked, Quentin kept talking. My world had shifted, but the dinner carried on. I bit down on the inside of my cheek, grounding myself in pain I could control. Humiliation burned through me, in my own home, at my own table. She had planted a dagger. The girl wanted me broken, to watch me fold in front of the very people I had spent my life feeding, raising, and forgiving. My mind tumbled pictures of birthdays where Osric was absent, years when I stretched pennies to give Quentin a chance, and nights when I prayed for peace in a house too quiet. And yet, I would not give her the pleasure. A laugh rose from deep in my chest, startling even me. It wasn't loud at first, just a chuckle slipping free before I could stop it. Then it grew, rolling across the table like a sudden breeze that made every head turn. The room froze. Forks paused in midair. Quentin's grin faltered, and Osric finally lifted his eyes to me. Isolde leaned back, her painted lips curling into a smirk. She thought my laughter meant surrender, that I was too foolish or too frail to fight. But I let it ring out, sharp and certain, until silence replaced every other sound. "Don't worry, dear," I said, voice steady, not a tremor to betray me. Quentin blinked, confused. Osric cleared his throat, his gaze dropping again to his plate. Isolde tilted her head, eyes glinting with triumph she hadn't earned. She thought she'd won already. Inside, I whispered to myself, if she wanted me crushed, she'd have to try harder. The table shifted after that. Conversation stumbled, then limped forward. Quentin kept talking, trying to patch holes he didn't see, while Osric chewed as though the food had turned to ash. Isolde smoothed her napkin, her smugness a mask stretched thin. I looked at them, each in their place, and thought of the years I had poured into this family, the sacrifices made in silence, the dignity I carried like armor when no one else was watching. In that moment, I understood that betrayal doesn't always come with shouting. It can come wrapped in Sunday dinner, hidden behind the clink of glass and the scent of cornbread. Mothers across this country know what it feels like to be sidelined, to be made invisible in homes they built with their own hands. Daughters-in-law who dismiss, husbands who vanish into their own desires, sons too blind to see the cost. I was one of them, but I would not stay erased. They thought I would crumble that night, I told myself, lifting my glass of sweet tea with a smile that held steel. But I only started to plan. I locked eyes with Isolde across the table, my laughter gone, replaced by a smile so calm it unsettled even me. She shifted slightly, still smirking, but I caught the flicker of something in her eyes. That night, they mistook my silence for defeat. What they didn't know was that silence can be sharper than a knife. It waits, it watches, and then it cuts clean. The table seemed to hold its breath after my laughter faded. The ticking of the wall clock sounded louder than it ever had before, and the candles flickered in the drafts, sneaking through the old window panes. Forks touched plates too carefully, the scrape of silver louder than words. My napkin sat in my lap, crease sharp against my palm, and I smoothed it as though order in fabric could restore order in my home. Quentin tried to laugh again, his voice breaking as he made some comment about the cornbread. Osric avoided my eyes, chewing too slowly, while Isolde shifted in her seat. Her lips curled in a grin just subtle enough to escape Quentin's notice. I knew that smile. It wasn't joy, it was a dare. I pressed my hand along the carved edge of the chair, grounding myself. I won't spill my pain where they serve dessert. I told myself. The scrape of a chair leg dragged through the quiet, and I knew something was about to change. Osric leaned across, his hand settling on Isolde's shoulder. It lingered there, too casual to be innocent, too long to be polite. "You're fine," he murmured, voice pitched low as if I couldn't hear. Isolde tilted her head toward him, her tone light, just a touch of nausea. I felt my stomach clench. It wasn't intimacy, it was a performance, a signal meant to be seen by me, to place her firmly under his protection. Quentin smiled awkwardly, misreading it as kindness. He saw a father showing concern for his wife. I saw an alliance sealed with the weight of a hand. My fork hovered above my plate, unmoving, around the table. Someone coughed, trying to break the silence. And the air recalibrated itself to the new reality. Inside, I whispered, "If they trade in signals, I'll answer with evidence when I'm ready." The salt shaker slid across the table with a clink. Someone asking for it just to fill the void. Its sound was like a metronome marking the rhythm of discomfort. Quentin jumped in with a work story. Words rushed and too bright, as though volume could patch the fracture. Isolde glanced at her phone screen face down, fingers brushing it like a habit. I caught it, filed it away, said nothing. I steadied my breath and folded the napkin with deliberate care. Keeping dignity as my armor, boundaries at a dinner table are learned in inches, not in speeches. Then came the scrape again, this time Quentin pulling Isolde's chair closer, the legs grinding against the floor until they bumped mine. "Make some room," he said cheerfully, tugging her nearer the head of the table. The sound was sharp, a wound disguised as furniture moving. Guests averted their eyes, pretending not to see my chair shift out of alignment. In that small gesture, the geometry of my own table was redrawn. The host's place had been nudged aside. I breathed in deeply, pain coursing through me, but I refused to let it spill over. Evidence of erasure that was what it was. I straightened my cutlery into a perfect line. My quiet counterbalance. If they wanted to edge me out, I would not flinch. I would record every move. "Your grandfather carved this table," I said evenly, the words landing with weight though my tone was mild. Quentin nodded without looking up. Isolde offered a smile, thin as tissue, while Osric sipped water. I adjusted my chair back with a quiet firmness, reclaiming space without making a scene. They thought they won ground. All they'd done was show me where they planned to fight. Osric raised his glass suddenly. "A toast to new life," he suggested. Glasses lifted without enthusiasm. I raised water instead of wine, clear and deliberate. Isolde tapped her glass twice, the second tap louder, deliberate, another signal. I filed it away. Quentin tried to lighten the moment with a half-joke that died in the air. A fork clinked against porcelain, too loud for chance. May what's true show itself without shouting? I said softly, raising my glass. Isolde's smile faltered just a fraction. Amen to that, she replied blandly, but her eyes locked on mine. We both knew the gauntlet had been thrown. As plates were cleared, I caught the faintest smear of lipstick on Osric's cuff, not proof, but enough to confirm the pattern. Later, in the hallway mirror. I angled my phone, snapping a quiet photograph, not confrontation record. They could move chairs. They could raise glasses. They could trade signals under my roof. Let them. I would move the ground beneath their feet. I folded my napkin with surgical precision, placed it in the center of my plate, and let that small act serve as my seal. The night had ended for them. But for me, the ledger had just begun. I woke before the sun crept over Charleston, the house still heavy with last night's sage and ham. The silence pressed on me as I moved slowly, gathering plates, stacking glasses, and wiping the edge of the oak table with deliberate strokes. Each motion was measured, my hands steady even if my chest still burned from what I'd endured. Osric's side of the bed had been empty when I passed through earlier, his jacket draped over the chair with a faint trace of cologne clinging to it. I made no conclusions. Data first, feelings later. The coffee machine gurgled. I poured it black. No cream, no sugar. I told myself a clear head was my armor. Sitting at the counter, I replayed the dinner like a reel, the whisper, the touch on her shoulder, Quentin's blind devotion. I noted who laughed, who avoided my eyes, what shifted where. Then I wrote a single line on a sticky note and pressed it to the fridge. Observe, record, don't react. My phone buzzed once, then twice. Group chat notifications waited like wasps behind the glass. When I opened it, Isolde's face stared back through the glow. A soft-lit photo of her hand pressed gently against her belly. The caption read, "Some blessings arrive with unexpected guidance." The comments flooded in. "So happy for you two. Family First Friends tagged Osric, tagged Quentin." The likes stacked up like applause. She had written it vague enough to seem innocent if cornered, but sharp enough to sting me in public. That girl didn't just whisper in my ear, she broadcast it in the town square. I screenshotted the post, every pixel, and saved the first 50 comments. Then I clicked her stories. A boomerang looped glasses clinking, tagged with the location of my house. Proof they were already rewriting the night as their triumph. A neighbor messaged, heard the big news, what a night. I typed thanks but deleted it before sending. I wasn't about to explain myself to the peanut gallery. In my church women's group, one sister posted new life, new beginnings, God is moving. The thread spiraled into blessings and congratulations, each line piling heavier on me. My thumb hovered over the keyboard, but I stopped. I'd learned this truth: you don't wrestle in wet sand if you want to stay clean. Instead, I printed the post, 3 pages of comments, hole-punched them, and slid them into a binder. Pixels vanish, paper remains. I didn't comment, didn't like, didn't message. Silence is its own statement. I created a folder labeled House Records and tucked another inside online screens. To the eye, it looked like tax paperwork. Ordinary, dull. That's the point. I jotted in my planner, nothing public. Everything saved. Then I texted Quentin. Just one line, leftovers in the fridge. He sent back a thumbs-up emoji, distance packaged as casual. I placed the phone face down. When people play for attention, silence is the closed door. Then I shifted focus numbers. Feelings lie, numbers don't. Logging into our bank account slowed me down with codes and questions, each screen giving me time to breathe. Utilities looked fine, but the savings balance lower, too low. I reached for my old planner, cross-checked my notes. Then I found it. Transfers labeled Family Transfer, all under Osric's login, moved into a shiny new account nicknamed Baby Fund. The memo lines mocked me: future, nest, custodial, poetry, written with my money. I printed the statement, marked the debits in yellow. I called the branch, my voice calm, pen ready. The representative explained. Polite but firm, Osric had opened the account. No minor needed. Permissions added. My name wasn't on it. I'm sorry, Mrs. Trammell, she said, voice carrying that mix of pity and distance. I asked for printed activity, a balance certificate. I had rights, not favors. I noted in my book they didn't move it in the dark. They moved it in euphemisms. I set alerts for transfers over $500, reset an old security question only I could answer. The paper trail met the pixel trail, tucked neatly in my folder. Then, slow and steady, I photographed the documents, stored them on a labeled drive, mirrored them to a USB tucked inside my sewing box. I listed assets, house deed, insurance, pension on a yellow pad. I marked what was mine, what was joint. I set a reminder for every Friday check balances. Vigilance is a habit, not a mood. I thought of calling an attorney. I didn't write it down. Some plans stay safe in the mind. I breathed, prayed for clarity, not revenge. Clarity is how you win without shouting. Then I ironed a table runner. Ordinary tasks kept me anchored. The printer hummed again, and then the family group chat lit up. Isolde suggested fresh family photo tomorrow, casual. Bright, new beginnings. Quentin answered with a heart emoji. Osric with clinking glasses. I looked at the thread, then at the folder, then back again. I typed nothing. Instead, I circled tomorrow's date in my planner with a thin, steady line. The Sunday sun spilled through my Charleston windows, warm and uninvited, as though it wanted to prove the world was still turning. I dusted the mantel, straightened frames one by one, noting which pictures stayed put and which had been quietly shifted in recent months. Photographs hold power placement whispers louder than words. The group text had sealed the plan, a fresh family photo on the porch. No photographer, just Quentin's phone propped on a stand. They'd chosen the words carefully, casual, bright, new beginnings. I ironed a cream blouse, smoothing the sleeves until they lay obedient, my steadiness showing even in cotton. On the counter, I set out lemonade, a wedge of cheese, and crackers. Hospitality without surrender, I told myself. The porch swing creaked outside, gulls squawked overhead, and the house hummed with the sound of preparation. I pressed my palm to my ribs where tension sat like a stone. Today wasn't about smiles. It was about measuring every movement. In the kitchen, Isolde glided in, her voice syrupy as she leaned against the counter. You've done enough. Really. Older women should step aside gracefully. Right. Her words stung, but I kept slicing lemon wheels. Citrus oil misted the air, sharp and clean, cutting through her perfume. Let me handle the vibe. She continued, we want it light, not heavy history. Her eyes flicked to the silver pitcher, my grandmother's, polished and gleaming. I lifted it and placed it at the center of the tray. Guests drink better when water is carried by memory, I said evenly. Her smile pinched at the edges. Perfect. Just hang back with the tray till we test the frame. Just a minute. Okay, I filed the phrase away. Just a minute too often becomes forever. I'll be where I'm needed, I answered. Perfect, she chirped, as if we'd agreed. I moved the timer remote to the porch table's edge, my hand brushing it like a bookmark in a story I hadn't finished. On the porch, Quentin fussed with the phone stand, muttering about height. Osric fluffed a throw pillow, conscience disguised as tidying. Isolde appeared with a chalkboard painted in bubbly script, New Beginnings. She set it front and center, right where the family Bible usually sat. I placed the silver pitcher within reach of the chalkboard. Light beside weight, my mother's words rang in my ear. Mom, can you hold the tray for 1 sec? Quentin called without glancing up. We'll call you once the height's right. I traced the porch boards with my eyes. 3 planks from the swing had always been my place in photos. I tested the phone's timer once, a casual press. The click told me I had 10 seconds to claim my space if they let me. The first test shot snapped Isolde and Quentin shoulder to shoulder, Osric behind them. Isolde beamed at the sun. The chalkboard tilted forward. Looks great already, she said. Mom, hang back one more, Quentin said, fiddling with the stand. The word one tasted like never. The second test clicked. Their laughter rang staged. Osric's cuff glinted, the faint lipstick smear still there, unnoticed by all but me. I stood at the edge, tray balanced. My reflection caught faintly in the window glass present, but erased. Isolde glanced at the screen. Ooh, this one slaps. She turned the phone for Osric, who nodded. Quentin grinned. No one called my name. We're good, Quentin said. We got it, Isolde echoed. We'll do one with everyone later. I set the tray down on the porch rail and said calmly, Set the timer for 10 seconds. I'm family. The air thickened, a swallow darted past, circled back. Sure, Isolde said lightly. She pressed the shutter on 3 seconds instead. Quentin cracked a joke to fill the gap. Too fast. The chime sounded before I could cross the boards. They crowded the phone, nodding. Perfect, Isolde said. Let's post before the light shifts. I picked up the chalkboard, read the painted words, and set it beside the picture. Reflection in the glass door showed my face still, unreadable. Quietly, I lifted the remote from the porch table and pressed the 10-second timer. I walked my 3 planks, stood where I belonged, and faced the lens. The shutter blinked. My body was in the frame, but at the last instant, a hand lifted the chalkboard, its words blotting me out. I raised my lemonade glass and said evenly, "Pictures have long memories, so do I." Quentin tapped through filters. Osric looked toward the street. Isolde's smile tightened. "We'll take more at Thanksgiving," she said. Her way of saying not now. "I'll slice more lemon," I replied, turning toward the kitchen. Boundaries don't need shouting. Later, in the hallway. My phone buzzed. Isolde had already posted the photo me cropped out, captioned "New Roots." Comments chimed, "So beautiful." U3 I screenshotted, printed, and filed it under online screens. Then I wrote a line on a sticky note. Photos can be edited, deeds cannot. I slid it between the pages of my Bible, where truth belonged. Sunday evening. I set the table with steady hands. Green beans steamed in a glass bowl. Cornbread sat golden in the skillet, and pot roast warmed gently in the oven. The kitchen smelled like comfort, but the air held none of it. I pulled my chair close to its usual place, a quiet reclaiming after the way they'd shifted me yesterday. The phone stayed face down. The folder of evidence waited in the study. Tonight, I was watching, not waving paper. I flicked the ceiling fan to low, set the thermostat, and clicked off the TV. Grace was coming, and I wanted no distractions. Their footsteps softened into the room, their voices careful. Butter and steam mingled with silence. Inside, I told myself I will clock what's said out loud and what's chosen to be left out. Osric cleared his throat, hands pressed together, and said he'd offer a quick word. It had been our tradition for decades, but tonight the cadence felt rehearsed. Thank you for this home, for this new season, for Quentin and Isolde and the little one we're hoping for. His voice wrapped them in warmth while skipping right over me. The omission rang louder than the prayer. My name had always belonged in those blessings, yet tonight it was erased with sugar-coated words. Bless the hands that prepared. He added, his eyes fixed on the counter. Not on me. Silence after amen stretched too long. Silverware clinked on porcelain. A noise meant to mask discomfort. Quentin tried lightness. Smells amazing. Isolde, her smile sweet, added, We're grateful. Truly. I served without flinching. Eat while it's hot. I spooned portions carefully, serving myself last. Not as punishment, but by choice. The difference mattered to me. Passing the cornbread right instead of left, small traditions I still owned, I placed an extra napkin by my plate, a symbol of cleaning up what I never caused. Inside, I logged it Grace used as theater is not grace, it's stage lighting. After dinner, I stacked plates and rinsed them in quiet water, leaving the dishwasher door cracked open, punctuation without words. Monday morning arrived with light stretching across the counter. I wrote a short list: blood pressure refill, cough lozenges, dish soap. A clipped coupon slipped into my wallet, shoes with good tread, keys in the bowl, the folder left at home. Today's errand was routine. The bell over the pharmacy door chimed as I stepped inside. The aisles were familiar. The clerks knew my name. I picked off brand lozenges, checked sodium labels, added soup to the basket. The tech at the counter smiled, asked about my weak ordinary kindness that steadied me. I slid my debit card. The machine beeped twice, declined. The tech frowned softly. Sometimes it's the strip. She wiped it. Tried again. Same beep. People shifted behind me, eyes pretending not to watch. I kept my breathing calm. Let's try credit, I said. Declined too. The total was modest, but the sting cut deep. It happens all the time. The tech murmured, No rush, we can hold these for you. I opened my coin purse, pulled out a 20 and changed my little envelope for small storms. The bills smoothed under my hand. I paid, asked for the receipt, and requested a printed prescription balance at the counter. I circled the date with their pen to, deliberate. Inside, I thought if they believed embarrassment would herd me home, they forgot whose mother I am. In the parking lot, I sat with receipts spread across the steering wheel. I photographed them, filed them into a phone album labeled 11 Finance. Then I called the bank, my voice polite, my pen steady. The representative explained recent transfers, a flagged account, unusual activity. I jotted names, dates, and authorization paths. I requested an appointment with the branch manager, asked for printed ledgers by midweek. I set alerts for nicknamed accounts. SMS for declines news would reach me before any register did. I whispered, keep my hands steady, and tucked duplicate receipts into the glove box, next to the manual. By the time I reached home, the family thread pinged again. Isolde's message, let's have a quick blessing before next Sunday's bigger dinner so everyone feels included. The phrasing was careful, bait wrapped in my own language. I typed a reply, erased it, and instead set a reminder in my planner call attorney estate and accounts. I slipped the pharmacy receipt under the same binder clip that held last night's screenshots. By late Monday afternoon, I swept the front steps and watered the porch ferns. The air carried a hint of salt from the harbor, the kind that clung to your skin and reminded you where you lived. My phone stayed tucked in my apron pocket, set to vibrate, quiet against my hip, inside the house. The lights were low, the receipts I'd clipped from the pharmacy and bank pinned neatly under a magnet on the fridge. The family thread buzzed with new messages, but I didn't open it. Feeding it would only waste my time. Instead, I shifted the heirloom pitcher on the hall table until its silver face caught the last bit of sunlight. History, I thought, doesn't move just because someone declares new. A delivery truck rolled down the street, brakes sighing. My street was returning to its rhythm. I told myself social noise first, then money. I was brushing off the porch rail when Mrs. Willis from 2 doors down slowed her walk. She leaned on the fence, voice low enough to sound like she was sharing a confidence. I heard Osric still charming the young ladies. You know how folks talk. I let her words hang there. They chimed in the space between us like a wind bell you don't touch. Finally, I said, people can say anything. Paper says what happened. Her face flickered, a little embarrassed at being left with her own rumor. She shifted quickly to safer ground, the church's Thanksgiving food drive, the need for canned beans and box stuffing. I nodded, promised to bring some, and wished her evening peace, inside. My thoughts steadied. Gossip was free, but documents required labor. I wasn't wasting effort correcting idle chatter. Instead, I opened my notepad and wrote social proof rising. Response none. Collect paper at my spare room desk. I pulled out the house records binder and slipped in a new divider labeled insurance. On a yellow legal pad, I listed policies, life, homeowners, auto, supplemental. I marked which statements came by mail and which by email, noting the gaps I hadn't seen in 2 months. Rules kept me sane: daylight hours for money, nighttime for rest. I planned to call the insurer before dinner better to catch real people on the line than machines after hours. I stacked my printouts like chapters of a story bank, transfers from last week on the left, pharmacy receipts from yesterday on the right, my life told in columns, each page a defense. The mail came, thudding into the box with its usual slap. Among the bills was an envelope stamped with the insurer's logo. Inside, a letter read, Change Confirmation Beneficiary Update. The bold line stopped me cold. Primary beneficiary Isolde Van. Effective date last week. I steadied my breathing, smoothed the page flat, and dialed the insurer. The call went on speaker while I took notes in ink. The representative confirmed it. Osric had made a telephone authorization. The record held a timestamp, a call ID. Was my name ever listed as primary, I asked? Yes, the rep said gently. Until the change last week. Do you retain the authorization record? Yes, on a recorded line. I'll need a copy of the full policy packet and the change form. I continued. It will arrive within 5 to 7 business days. Then please include the benefit designation history with dates, I added, and any notes explaining who initiated and who confirmed. She agreed, logging my request. I underlined the effective date twice in my notes and slid the confirmation letter behind the envelope's plastic window. Proof belonged with its origin. Before dinner, I lined up countermeasures. I set calendar reminders, check policy mail in 5 days, follow up at 7. I wrote myself an instruction. Open a PTO, box sensitive mail goes there. I drafted a 1-page letter for my attorney request estate review. Beneficiary history, deed copies, and alerts for joint accounts. I printed 3 copies of the confirmation, 1 for my binder, 1 for my attorney, 1 for the safe place only I knew. A USB drive labeled Records Nov went into my sewing box, nestled between spools of thread. Backups meant survival. I didn't confront Osric. My power wasn't in volume. My power was in sequence paper, then policy, then people. The family thread pinged again. Isolde had written, "Let's do a quick blessing before Sunday's dinner so everyone feels included." The words echoed my kitchen from last night, borrowed and polished. I wrote on my pad at blessing say little, observe much, no documents. Then I tapped the phone dark and returned to my binder. They could play with optics. I collected facts. By nightfall, I sealed my attorney letter and placed it by the door with tomorrow's keys. The insurance confirmation went under the binder clip marked priority. The porch light clicked on. The street quieted. The house hummed like it was listening. I whispered, "Let paper do the talking," and turned off the lamp. By midweek, I switched on the entry lamp and left the living room in its natural state. No candles, no extra shine, just my house as it had always been. 3 folding chairs waited in a line, 1 more in the corner, my quiet way of saying where everyone belonged. My phone sat on the buffet, silenced. The binder closed away in the spare room. Lemon water filled the silver heirloom pitcher. There would be no wine. I wasn't setting a stage for celebration. The door chime rang, and in they came with soft voices. Just a quick stop. Won't take long. Their coats landed on the same chair, Quentin's shoes scuffing the mat like a boy still caught between obedience and indifference. I greeted them evenly. Evening, and watched who glanced at which room as though my walls were mirrors. Osric suggested the couch, but I gestured toward the straight-back chairs by the mantel. "We'll sit here. No comfort staging tonight, decorum only." Isolde laid out a notepad, tidy bullets, short prayer, light remarks, photo moment. Quentin leaned forward, saying, "Let's keep it breezy." His words fluttered, hollow. They spoke of inclusion, of keeping it light, of making sure no one feels heavy. I listened, then answered, "Plain Sunday is Sunday. Today is logistics." My eyes stayed on their hands, Osric's cuff adjusted twice. Isolde's pen tapped. Quentin's knee bounced like a drumbeat. The air breathed around all the words they wouldn't speak. When I asked, "Who will open first?" Osric didn't answer right away. He looked at Isolde, and she met his eyes too long, too steady before he spoke. That was no romance, that was coordination. His cuff flicked, her pen tapped. Quentin nodded in rhythm. A grammar of collusion right in my living room. I straightened my back and said evenly, "If it's my house?" The opening words start from my chair, short and truthful. "Of course," Isolde smiled, the kind of smile that said, "We'll see." The clock ticked half a minute. The heater came alive with its low hum. The air felt heavy with their unspoken contract. I didn't interrupt. I recorded first in my memory, later in ink. I set house rules the way a mother sets curfews, not for debate. No surprises at my table. If you have a speech, send it ahead. No changes to seating. Elders sit where they've always sat. No camera before grace. No posts before dessert. Simple rules. American rules. House rules. Quentin shifted, glanced at Isolde. She kept her bright smile, saying, "That's fair." The tone bent, though like a twig waiting to snap. I added, "If you need something I didn't mention, you ask me. Not each other about me." The room stilled. Their collusion hit a wall that sounded like oak. Later, as we rose, Isolde brushed close near the hallway. Voice a whisper meant for me alone. "Careful, Zenobia. Old bones break easily." The word slid sharp, meant to cut. I didn't flinch. "These bones built the room you're standing in." I said, "Chin steady. Walk respectfully." Osric cleared his throat, pretending it was nothing. Quentin fumbled with keys he didn't need. Isolde lifted her chin, perfume trailing as she stepped out, rehearsing victory in her silence. I moved the silver pitcher from buffet to mantel, placing history back at the center. I slid the porch photo without me into a plain folder labeled Sunday Optics. On a blank card, I wrote speaking order Sunday, my name first. Quentin lingered on the porch, jacket half on, as though, Mom, let's just keep it smooth. Smooth isn't the same as honest, I told him. It's what makes things work, he pressed. No, I said softly. Things are not working. He hugged me quick, more habit than love. I patted his shoulder, a receipt, not agreement. Inside, I wrote notes on a small pad, Sunday timer, seating, opening words. I gathered blank index cards for names, not yet filled. I set my phone in the entry bowl, locked the door, and dimmed the lamp, leaving the nightlight on for morning. They had colluded in my house, but my reply was not with volume, it was with structure. A knock startled me after they left. Not them, it was the mail slot. An envelope slid onto the rug, stamped with a clinic logo. Osric's name in the window. I didn't open it. I placed it under the clock. Light will find this. I whispered to the quiet. Thursday afternoon. I stepped onto the back porch with pruning shears and a canvas tote. The camellias were budding, a stubborn pink pushing through the late fall chill. The air smelled of salt and pine. That Charleston blend I'd known my whole life. I texted Thaddeus Crowder a simple line, if you're nearby, the gutters could use a look. His reply came quick. On my way, no emoji, just the plainness of a man who worked with his hands. The neighbor's dog barked. The street hummed with delivery trucks and distant traffic. All of it told me who might overhear and who wouldn't. I set a pitcher of water and 2 clear glasses on the porch rail. No colored tumblers, details mattered. My phone stayed face down on the table. I wanted my eyes, not a screen, guiding me. I promised myself I'd listen more than I spoke. The garden would comfort, and the paper would do the talking. Thaddeus arrived with his ladder balanced easy over his shoulder. Afternoon. Miss Trammell, he said, nodding the way men nod when respect doesn't need ceremony. He set to work, boots silent on the boards, hands moving like they'd been born to fix things. When he came down, he paused, hand going to his chest pocket. This came mixed in with invoices at my place, he murmured. He unfolded a trifold bill, clinic letterhead shining at the top. Billing code that read prenatal, the patient name Osric Delaney, service date last week. I ain't looking to be in y'all's business. He added softly. Just didn't feel right to toss it. I didn't snatch. I received it carefully, fingers on the edge, so the oils from my skin wouldn't smudge the ink. I read once for facts, once for tactics account number, CPT codes, billing line. My pulse slowed into steadiness. I slid the bill between pages of a cookbook on the porch table. My mother kept recipes and receipts with equal reverence. I learned from her. I poured him water, and we said only safe words. Thank you. Take care. Adults communicate plenty by how they stand. Once he left, I set the bill flat on the patio table, snapped 2 photos, one wide with my watch face showing the date, one close on the header. On an index card, I wrote received from Thaddeus C., 3:20 p.m. back garden. I signed it like my own affidavit and slipped both into a protector, filed under medical Osric external. Then I wiped the table clean with water. No crumbs for questions later. Inside, I rinsed 2 tumblers and 1 wine glass, drying them with a lint-free towel. On the den table, I placed the wine glass at Osric's usual seat, though I planned to fill it with water. People reached for what looked like theirs. I tucked a small Ziploc beside the bread box, an envelope labeled Napkin O hidden behind it. The dishwasher was empty, the sink clear. Tonight's glass would be the only glass. I texted him, headed home before 6, supper ready. Neutral, no hooks. At 6:15, Osric came in, rubbing his hands against the chill. Air's turning, he said. Soup's on, I answered, handing him the wine glass filled with water. We talked plane traffic, a pie sale at church, the smell of the pot simmering on the stove. I watched where his lips touched the rim. At 10 o'clock on the circle, a faint mark appeared. I noted it. The folder on the counter stayed untouched. Tonight, my kitchen was a lab disguised as home. After dinner, he moved to the den to check the game scores. I cleared dishes with unhurried hands. I lifted the glass by its stem, the smudge catching the light. From a craft bag, I pulled a cotton swab and rolled it gently along the rim, breaking the tip into a small envelope marked only with the date. A second swab followed, backup insurance. I slipped his napkin into the envelope labeled Napkin O, sealed it tight. The glass I rinsed halfway, leaving a faint ring half clean. Half-truth. Enough to confuse. Never to clear. Both envelopes slid into a rigid mailer, tucked into the crisper drawer beneath lettuce heads. Cool, ordinary, invisible. If he'd walked in, I had lines ready, just tidying. Leave the glass, I'll hand wash. Want more soup instead? The night hum normal? The night hummed. I wrote my list, photocopy the bill. Call the clinic for codes. Research labs in Charleston. A calendar square, 3 days out, PE0O. Box mail run. Before bed, I arranged the living room. Timer remote tested. Place cards reset my name at the head. Isolde left. Quentin right. Osric across. The heirloom pitcher stood tall at the mantel. Chalkboard tucked behind. On an index card, I penned my line. This house stands on what's true, not what's loud. I placed it inside my Bible, dimmed one lamp, and left the nightlight glowing down the hall. My phone buzzed Isolde in the group chat. Sunday's gonna be gorgeous. Can't wait. I slid the DNA envelopes deeper into the crisper. Pressed the clinic bill folder behind the flour tin. Paper above, proof below, by Sunday. I whispered to the quiet kitchen. I'll serve them truth with supper. I set the table like a woman setting a stage. The heirloom pitcher gleamed in the center, steady as my backbone. Place cards lay firm, my chair at the head, Osric across from me, Isolde on my left, Quentin on my right, lighting low, mantle in focus. The room carried a weight that wasn't just supper. The kitchen timer ticked in my pocket, a hidden conductor ready to move the evening where I needed it to go. 2 small DNA envelopes sat folded inside my cardigan, clipped tight. I whispered my line into the still air. This house holds paper and truth. Quentin came first, pie box in hand, setting it down like an offering against silence. His eyes searched mine, nervous but practiced. Then came Osric and Isolde, side by side, their coats too neat, their smiles too wide for the cloudy sky. They filled the doorway with perfume and pretense. Traffic was light, Osric said, brushing his cuff twice before sitting. Church crowd was late, Isolde chimed, sliding into her seat like it was always hers. I greeted even welcome. Sit. My tone wasn't cold, but it wasn't warm. It was boundary. Quentin bowed his head for blessing. Murmuring a thanks, Osric added a clipped verse. I closed with, "May truth sit with us," halfway through the meal, with spoons scraping bowls and forks tapping plates. I rose. I set the folded envelope on the mantel. My voice was every day, but it carried before dessert one housekeeping matter. The paper opened crisp. Bold print spoke louder than any sermon names. Matches. Exclusions. I laid the words down plain. This paper says what whispers deny. My husband fathered no child outside this marriage. Isolde's napkin twisted in her fist, her eyes darting to Osric, desperate for cue. Quentin froze. Fork midair. Pie forgotten. Lies are heavy, I said, steady as stone, but paper carries light. Osric cleared his throat, fumbling, clerical error. I cut him with a timeline, the clinic bill date, the insurance change, the recorded call, evidence stacked neat like plates. The clock ticked loud. The room turned courtroom. Betrayal was no longer shadow. It was certified. Isolde shot to her feet, chair screeching across the floor. You set me up. Her voice cracked, spilling secrets too fast to catch. He promised me, said he'd take care of me if enough. Isolde Osric barked, sharp as a whip, but his tone betrayed him. She pointed, shaking. You said she'd be gone soon, that this house would be mine. You called me your future. Quentin's hand trembled at his side. My God, he whispered, voice breaking. I sat steady, lips pressed, letting the storm unravel itself. Isolde's mascara streaked down her face. Her perfume turned sour with sweat. Her earlier brightness shattered into sobs and accusations. Around us, the silence of witnesses grew heavy. A jury with no gavel. Quentin's voice cracked. Dad, how could you? Osric muttered. It's complicated. Quentin slammed his palm on the table, rattling glasses. No, it's selfish. I leaned forward, voice even. Complicated is what liars say when caught? Quentin's eyes glistened, shame and apology swimming but unsaid. I rested my hand flat on the table, not to comfort, but to remind I was still here. I rose, plate in hand, and declared, Dinner is concluded. No theatrics, just order. I blew out the mantel candle, smoke curled up, light gone. Isolde bolted, coat half on, words choking in her throat. Osric followed slower, muttering, This isn't over. Quentin lingered, sliding the pie box back toward me. Silent as he left, One by one, they exited, one by one. The weight lifted, I rinsed the plates, steady hands, upright shoulders. The house was mine again, not tender, but clean, alone in the hush. I tucked the DNA results into the binder behind priority, in the mantel glass. My reflection stared back, a woman steady, unbroken. My phone buzzed, a new voicemail. I pressed play. A woman's voice, firm but cautious. Mrs. Trammell, this is the clinic. We need to confirm a detail about your husband's visit. I let the words hang, cold and sharp. The table had shattered, but the fracture was still widening. I replayed the voicemail as sunlight angled through the blinds. Pen in hand, I wrote the callback number, extension, and timestamp on a yellow sticky and pressed it against my binder's priority clip. The medical Osric external section lay open, Sunday's DNA copy beside the clinic bill Thaddeus had passed to me. The family group chat buzzed in the background, but I silenced it. Today wasn't for chatter, it was for paper. Coffee black, table cleared, legal pad waiting, phone face down. I whispered my aim like a vow. No speeches, only facts. When the clock hit 8:01 a.m., I dialed. I like catching people at the front door of their day. The line clicked, and I reached Delia March, clinic administrator. I gave my name, the billing reference, the issue. My voice stayed measured, but my words precise. She confirmed the file listed Osric Delaney as responsible party for prenatal services tied to Isolde Van. Service date matched last week's bill. My chest stayed steady, though my grip on the pen tightened. I asked for the consent trail. Delia read a phone authorization from Osric's number, and an in-person HIPAA release signed by Isolde. The signature varied slightly from Osric's baseline on file. I requested a formal variance flag. She entered the note, generated a case number, and promised mailed copies of the itemized bill, the consent log, and call timestamps to my P.O. box. Then I pressed further. Did staff observe Osric in person? She checked, answered flat, only. Isolde was present. She initialed that note herself. I thanked her. No drama, just courtesy. She replied, "You're doing the right thing." I underlined the case number twice. Fax had walked into the room and taken a seat. Pastor Miriam's text arrived next, praying with you. Do you need anything practical? My reply, documentation, space, and quiet. She offered me a midweek check-in. 15 minutes to talk, not confess. I accepted. Her line stayed with me. Truth doesn't need volume, only daylight. I boxed those words on my pad, fuel for the next stop. By late morning, I walked into Palmetto State Bank with my binder and driver's license. The lobby smelled of paper and sanitizer. Carol Reese, the branch manager, shook my hand firm. We sat in her glass office. I slid across highlighted ledger entries labeled Baby Fund, along with the pharmacy decline receipt from weeks before. I spoke calm review transfers, remove authorized contributor, add dual signature for withdrawals, SMS alerts for all activity. Carol's fingers flew across the keyboard, printing a transfer review with an exception flag. I signed 2 forms, circled the effective date in her pen, my name taking root in ink. She explained the baby fund wasn't custodial, just a nickname. That gave her leverage to freeze outbound transfers. She processed a provisional credit back to our joint account under disputed authorization. She revoked access for non-primary names. The system pinged. A confirmation rolled out with our initials side by side. Carol stapled her card and wrote in ink, "Call me first. Thank you for protecting what I earned." I told her. She smiled gently. "You did this by asking the right questions." I walked out with a thin stack of paper heavy as iron. In the parking lot, my phone buzzed. Bank alerts had already reached Osric. His name flashed, but I let it ring out. I texted One Line House at 600. "We will discuss logistics, not blame." At 6, he stormed in, jaw set. "How could you?" I lifted my hand. We are past speeches. I set terms guest room for now. Key on the tray. No online access from devices in this house. All transfers require 2 signatures. "I'm your husband," he spat. "You have obligations," I replied. "I am protecting mine." "You may stay tonight," I added evenly. "Tomorrow, we set a separate address for your mail." His laugh carried no humor, but he sat. Even rage has to obey when rules are written down. Meanwhile, Isolde posted a glossy story healing and growth, but comments turned sharp. "Is the baby okay? Why tag his house?" I screenshotted and filed them. I didn't reply. Quentin texted back after my update. Thanks, Mom. 2 words that landed like balm. Evening quieted. I rinsed my cup. Ledger flat on the table like a quilt finely bound. Mail slid through the slot. A cream envelope stamped with the county clerk's seal. Inside notice of emergency hearing, financial protections, temporary orders. Friday morning, I placed the notice on the mantel beneath the heirloom pitcher. The way my mother laid out Sunday gloves. Visible. Purposeful. At dawn. I laid the binder tabs in perfect order: medical, Osric external, bank transfers, insurance beneficiary, Sunday DNA. I clipped Delia March's case number to the clinic notes, Carol Reese's card beneath the bank printouts. A plain scarf and low-heeled shoes waited by the door. Nothing flashy, just me. An older black woman showing up steady. I texted Pastor Miriam, heading in. I'm all right. She answered, lights with you. That was enough. I tucked a small notepad and 2 black pens into my purse, rehearsing 3 lines in my head. Yes, Your Honor, I have documentation. No, I don't wish to speak beyond the record. Coffee without cream, blinds half open, and I stepped out at 8:10. The lock clicked like a promise. The courthouse hallway smelled of lemon cleaner and paper. I checked in with the clerk, sat near the wall, eyes on the clock. Osric arrived in a suit that looked like an apology. Isolde came after, wrapped in soft colors, but her jaw set like stone. Quentin texted, I'm outside if you need me. I replied, stay at work, I've got it. Pastor Miriam slipped in quietly, 1 chair away. Her presence held me without words. I thumbed through my index tabs again, breathing slow. When the bailiff opened the door, I saw the judge's nameplate, Harold S. Boone, my mantra repeated. Facts take the stand. Feelings sit in the pew. Case of Trammell versus Delaney. The bailiff called. Judge Boone presided with clear diction, his voice carrying weight. He confirmed emergency hearing on financial protections and temporary orders. Isolde's legal aid attorney rose. Osric said he'd represent himself. The judge's ground rules were plain speak when addressed. Present documents, not speeches. Time is limited. I stood, introduced myself, stated my age and address, and handed the clerk my binder with labeled tabs. We'll take banking first, the judge said. I rested my hands flat on the table. No tremor. I opened with the transfer review flagged by Carol Reese, the baby fund nickname. Unauthorized contributor access. Receipts showing harm when my card was declined at the pharmacy. Dates, amounts, and signatures lined up under his gaze. Osric tried to argue household discretion, but Judge Boone cut in joint does not mean unilateral. The clerk stamped my papers, banking closed with the weight of fact. Not volume. Next came the insurance and clinic. I showed the change confirmation beneficiary update listing Isolde. I stated the recorded call authorizing the switch came from Osric's number, then Delia March's notes HIPAA release with a signature variance, and no Osric present at check-in. Isolde's attorney muttered about clerical mix-ups. Judge Boone's reply was dry. That's what audits are for. He asked if paternity was at issue. I answered calmly. DNA excludes my husband, clinic billing ties to him regardless. He nodded once. This is a financial protection hearing, not paternity court, but financial exposure flows from facts. Then the gavel came down with orders. Immediate freeze on disputed transfers, beneficiary restored to prior status, exclusive occupancy of the home to me. Osric could collect personal belongings only with sheriff escort, no third-party access, not Isolde, not anyone else. A 30-day review set, certified copies to be issued today. This is not punishment, the judge said evenly. This is protection. Respect it. My answer was steady. Yes, Your Honor, my shoulders dropped. My spine stayed tall. Isolde's attorney tried for a carve-out family events at the house. The judge shook his head. Find neutral venues. Osric asked to keep a key, denied. A request for social media restraint got only a warning. No harassment, no defamation. Let the order speak. The clerk handed me 3 certified copies. I slid them into my binder, paper in hand, protection in ink, outside. Sunlight hit the courthouse steps like relief. Pastor Miriam squeezed my elbow. Go home, rest. Quentin texted again. I told him. Protected. We'll talk this weekend. Across the plaza, I watched deputies serve papers first to Isolde, who held them like they burned, then to Osric, who couldn't meet my eyes. The plaza swallowed their mutters. My purse carried peace heavier than iron. At home, I called the locksmith. New keys by dusk. Osric's mail moved into a bin marked with his name. I texted him 2 time slots for sheriff-escorted pickups. On the inside of the closet door, I taped a note, orders on the mantel. I placed the heirloom picture at the center again. The house aligned itself around it. Evening mail slid through the slot, a thick envelope from Hollis and Brandt. Attorneys I'd never heard of. Inside notice of intent to pursue civil claims for emotional distress if I continue public dissemination of private matters. I smiled without humor, slid it under the court orders, and wrote 1 line on my pad: paper meets paper. Saturday morning, I laid Hollis and Brandt's notice of intent beside the certified orders from Judge Boone. I drew 1 line across the top of my pad orders: noise. Then I called Pastor Miriam for a 5-minute check. Not spirit talk, I said. Just practical steadiness. She replied, facts, not fumes. I stacked 3 outgoing envelopes, 1 to the clinic's compliance office, 1 to the insurer's special investigations unit, and 1 to Hollis and Brandt. At the top of my pad, I wrote my aim: close the door clean, open another on purpose. A timer ticked on the counter, 30 minutes per task. Coffee black, curtains half open. I worked while the house breathed with me. By noon, attorney Lenora Pike had returned my call. I'd left her a message through a pro bono line Pastor Miriam recommended. I read her the notice aloud, then sent scans of the court orders, bank freeze confirmations, and Delia's case number. Lenora wrote a reply on letterhead. Tight and precise, these were privileged statements, filed under court protection. Intimidation would be answered by motion. She warned them to preserve evidence texts, DMs, even social posts for discovery if they dared proceed. 1 line stood taller than the rest. Any further attempt at harassment will be addressed in court. I signed receipt acknowledgement, walked it to the post office. The clerk stamped it hard, red ink, clacking like a gavel. I carried home tracking numbers taped to my binder, proof that paper doesn't just sit, it travels. By afternoon, Delia March called back. The clinic had opened a compliance audit. That signature variance and phone authorization were now flagged. She confirmed a referral to the insurer's special investigations unit. Case numbers rolled off her tongue. I wrote each one into my binder in block letters. She added a staff note: no Osric present at check-in. Initials and timestamps secure. I thanked her quietly. She told me, you did right by your house. I hung up and underlined audit open twice. This was not vengeance. It was the system doing what it should have done all along. I reset the house at midday. Our wedding photo moved from the mantel into an archival box, not out of spite, but out of order. I tucked the old place cards into the drawer marked Sunday done. I polished the mantel with lemon oil, centered the heirloom picture again. I texted Quentin, working through the list, soup later if you want. His reply warmed me. Proud of you, Mom. I cracked open the windows. Salt air drifted in, soft and forgiving. At 3. The deputy knocked. Osric stood beside him, duffel bag limp at his side, face stiff with pride. We moved room to room while I kept my back straight. Clothes, papers, toiletries went into his bag. When he reached for the liquor cabinet, I shook my head. The deputy raised a hand. Not on the list. At the door, I set a dish on the tray. Key, I said. He placed it down. The metal landed like a period. The deputy logged the items, the time, the surrender. Osric signed with a hand that shook. He looked at me long, cold. I hope you're happy, he muttered. I'm lawful, I replied. Happiness is work for another day. The door closed, the lock clicked. The silence after was cleaner than any hymn. That evening, I opened the bank binder. I totaled the provisional credits and reversals. A portion for legal fees, a portion for repairs, and a portion I marked for growth. I drafted a charter grandmother's table fund, small grants for groceries, GED fees, reading tutors for grandmothers raising grandkids here in Charleston County. I called Pastor Miriam to be fiscal sponsor until I set the account. We'll do it right, she said. I set one rule: no photos, no forced stories, just receipts and thanks if they choose. Everyday justice. Simple, I can't fix the world, but I can set one table longer. By supper, the first check was already signed. I cooked okra and tomatoes, cornbread in the skillet. The kitchen smelled like my mother saying, "Feed yourself like your company." Quentin stopped by, ate a bowl, kissed my cheek. We talked weather, not wounds. I washed dishes by hand, slow, and set them in the rack as if lining up instruments for another song. My wedding ring slipped into a velvet pouch, stored in the archival box. Not an announcement, just inventory. Before bed, I wrote 3 notes for my seniors group check account nicknames monthly. Keep a P.O. box, write house rules and live them. Then I added 1 line at the bottom, quiet is not surrender. It is the stance before the swing. Sunday dusk, the mail slot clicked. A padded envelope slid across the rug, Hollis and Brandt's return address. Inside, 1 sentence, our client withdraws her notice. No apology, just retreat. I smiled, switched off the lamp, and stepped into the spare room. It would become my reading nook. On the wall, I imagined a sign, "This house keeps the truth."